Can you hear me? Hello. I've been invited along here tonight to talk to you about Bob Dogs. That's Mr. Bob Dogs and the Church of the Subgenius. I must admit, after hearing about Bill Drummond, Ken Campbell and Robert Hunter Wilson, I do feel a little bit of a fraud, and not for the first time in my life, but I'll do my best. Some say that the story of Bob is actually based on Robert Hunter Wilson. I don't know if that's true or not, but it has been rooted. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the church, some of its main themes and tenets, and how we sort of incorporated those ideas here in Brighton. I'll start with a story about how we were featured on a late night TV programme, and a few days later I had this frizzy-haired, sort of eccentric type turned up with his niece, and he said that Bob was an extension of Brighton that started with Alfred Jarry and the Theatre of the Absurd in late 19th century Paris. And then told me about Dadaism and Situationism and a few French philosophers. From what I know about Dadaism, it's the only sane reaction to an insane world is to go insane, and I do feel how that relates to Bob. So, the beginnings of Subgenius are really murky, and deliberately so. There's so much disinformation and misinformation out there. It's very difficult to get any hard facts. From what I gather, it started in the 60s, 70s. It was mainly by a guy called Ivan Stang, but there's a few comic book artists. Gilbert Shelton, who did the fabulous Very Free Brothers, was part of it. And if you look on the walls of the Free Brothers, you'll see little Bob pictures. And they started it as the Church of the In-Joke. And they wrote a lot of literature, did a lot of artwork based around the theme. And in 1979, the first book of the Subgenius was published. As you can see, it's a mighty tome. It's nearly impossible to talk about the Subgenius without actually sounding like a complete lunatic, but I'll do my best. For me, it's the cult of the anti-cult, the religion for the non-religious. There's some great quotes in the back that sum it up perfectly for me. This is either a sleazy fly-by-night scam or the most incredible work of art I've seen in 10 years. It is in every sense a seminal work in humanity's quest for slack. Or a sick masterpiece for those who, bear with me, a sick masterpiece for those who still can laugh at the fact that nothing is funny anymore. And my favourite, a rare knack of masking genuine wisdom in the guise of utter bullshit. It's funny actually, I was going to say, is it a religion posing as a joke or a joke posing as a religion? And that quote was said earlier on, so I wouldn't say it. Literally, and I do mean the word literally in its real sense, it's a story of Bob Dogs. He's a travelling salesman in the 1950s. Bob is a personification of the American dream, the classic clean-cut image of corporate America. Also, he's so normal, he's abnormal. Bob is visited by aliens who tell him to reclaim the slack that the conspiracy stole from us. What is slack? Slack is like nirvana to the Buddhists. The concept of slack is a state in which you need nothing because you have it already. It's not about sitting around doing nothing, but doing what you love to do. Do what keepeth thou from wilting, as it says. For me, it's like going with the flow, taking time to enjoy life without worrying about money, mortgages, what to wear. All these are described as anti-slack in the book. It's like a satire on consumerism as well as religion. Although we still want you to buy the book, buy the t-shirts, buy the DVDs, buy the stickers. Bob's inherently contradictory. As it says, Subgenius makes sense, has sense, sells sense. Common sense, sense of humour, dollars and cents. The book itself is impenetrable. It's a celebration of the weird and abnormal. It's full of truisms, but not truth. It's a mishmash of like religious texts, conspiracy theories, self-help manuals, the love of Mad magazine and trash culture. Full of cut and paste artwork and steeped in very, very, very black humour. In my opinion, the Subgenius is the most honest of religions. It's so blatantly fraudulent. It says, "This is lies, believe it." I think a couple of its slogans, and he's very fond of slogans, but it pull the wool over your own eyes and relax in the safety of your own delusions. Other slogans include, and this is the standard get out clause, all the things we ever did, fuck them if they can't take a joke. And you're paid to know what you really think. If you act like a dumb shit, they'll treat you as an equal. And I don't practice what I preach, because I'm not the kind of person I'm preaching. So Bob immediately found allies with the arty punk bands of the time. Devo were early devotees, especially Mark Mothersbaugh. The song Puzzling Evidence by Talking Heads on the True Stories album, that's all about Subgenius. And in this country, in the late 90s, 80s, the band Cud in Leeds there was a lot of Bob activity around there. Now I go to 1991, and that's when I was first introduced to Bob. I was walking through Brighton, had to go to the loo. I went to see a friend's house, Nick Gray. Nick Gray was a cartoonist. He did a wonderful cartoon comic called Watermelon, very psychedelic, really out there character. And on his wall, he had a picture of Bob. As you can see, Bob, everything else on his wall was all psychedelic, so Bob just leapt out at me. For me, it reminded me of the Daddy Sauce bottle, with the face from Daddy Sauce bottle when I was a kid. And we've all seen Bob somewhere down the line, and it intrigued me. So Nick gave me a brief explanation of what it was about, but all I heard was weird cult from America, and basically this was the last thing I needed in my life at the moment. This was the early 90s, it was a recession, the business I was running in was in debt, I had negative equity, I had one baby with another one on the way, they're both in the audience tonight. Weird cult from America. No thanks, Nick. I've got other things to think about. Thank you. But bless him, he persevered, and a few days later he came around to my workshop and he dropped the book on my lap and said, "No, Jim, you really got to read the book." And I must admit, it was an epiphany. I just loved it. I loved the whole concept of Slack. I loved the art. I loved the humour. Like it was a fully realised, brilliantly executed anti-religion that even I could believe it. And I must admit, also down the line, because I was screen printer by trade, the chance to maybe make some money was reproducing the Bob image on stickers and shirts. So there was that, but that was never my main thrust with why I got into Bob. So I locked myself away and I read the book from cover to cover. And as I said, it's pretty impenetrable. I've never been able to read it since. That was the 2-week window in my life where I could read the book. So, and I didn't know if I was going mad. I really didn't know if I was going mad. I didn't know if I was brainwashed. Didn't know if I was being reprogrammed. I definitely felt this I looked at the world in a different way after reading the book. And I had a mission. I had faith. And I was impelled with a religious fervour to set out to promote Bob. I quit my job for Bob, and I lost stress, got myself my slack back. But I didn't want to preach it. I'm far too English and reserved. And if you look at any of the Subgenius stuff online, it's all Americans shouting at you and being really ranty. That's not my style. I wanted to make it more Anglophile. I wanted to cherry pick all the stuff that I really believed in. So I wanted to get the face out there subtly. It was at this point in my life I met somebody called Derek. Now Derek had a screen printing business in London. He did his own range of t-shirts, Big Jesus trash can. He printed a lot of the original smiley face from the rave culture, and he had a UK subs tattoo on his wrist. He had a very good pedigree. we got on really well. So we did our first Bob party in my back garden. It was a really surreal night. There was 30 of us, different groups of people. No one really knew each other. We all wore Bob shirts, and we had a massive grey food fight. And there was just something happened that night. It was a real magic in the air. Could have been the acid punch, but it was something more solid. It was brilliant. And so what we decided to do, we decided to move up front to Brighton, because Derek had been commuting to London and got pain of that. And looking around, and a friend called Jerry had seen the workshop in Providence Place, 50 Providence Place, and we didn't know if things were very tight. We didn't know whether we could be there for a week, 2 weeks. We ended up being there 20 years. For a lot of people here, it's a legendary place, and so we moved in there in 1991. Woo! Officially, it was called Upfront Inc. Then it was BDI, but it was always known as the Bob Shop. So we organised a New Year's Eve party to start before we moved all the equipment in there to raise some money. There was a strange time to do putting parties in those days. People were getting arrested, put in jail for putting parties on, so it was quite risky. But the way the workshop was, it had a little office with a little door, and then it opened up into 2,000 square foot behind it. So people looked at the party and we were pulling them in off the street. By the time the police realised where it was, we had about 200, 300 people in there. They tried to stop it. They blocked the doors, they blocked the road, but we managed to open the back doors. Everyone streamed in, and it was a really era-defining party. It was Brighton's first free party. Fantastic night, absolutely brilliant. We didn't make any money, but that was to be a running theme for the next 20 years. But it put a real brilliant spirit into the place, and so we wanted Slack, to incorporate Slack into the workshop. We didn't just want it to be a place where we just go along to work. So we built a skate ramp in there. We had a friend, I met a guy called Vince who'd been over to Paris and seen a lot of stencil art, and he built a stencil art. This was years before bankruptcy. And so the place became a real sort of community hub and a bubble away from the outside world. So then I wanted to start promoting Bob. Basically, my deal with Derek was I'd work for you for nothing, as long as I could print all the Bob stuff, and obviously he was more than happy to accept that. So initially we did a few club nights. There was a club nights called Slack, and I started doing my own Bob nights. We used to put out subgenius literature, questionnaires, and dub some of the sayings over the music. Didn't want to. Yeah. So the sticker campaign was the main thing, to get the face out there. That's what I really wanted to do. So any shop signs, any posters, road signs, the neighbourhood watch signs. My particular favourite was the Dino Rod vans at the time. They'd have a whole guy, and he looked quite like Bob, and if you just put the sticker right in the right place, for months they used to drive around Brighton subconsciously promoting Bob. And then they changed the design of the bus. But, I've since been told that that's called psychogeography, so subtly changing your environment for your own. It's not being blatant, just people catching out the corner of their eyes and going, what are those? So people were intrigued. And Bob slowly seeped into Brighton's subconscious and conscious. This was the time of DIY culture, and there was an anti-ego thing. I felt Bob, it wasn't about us, Bob's face sort of took the ego thing away, so it was all about Bob. This is why it's quite difficult for me to do this, because actually this is me, and I'd much rather be standing here in a Bob mask and no one knows. Unfortunately, we don't hear me and so on. So we started doing oh my god, I forgot, I've done this here. They've only done the slides. Last time I did this, I totally forgot to do the slides. I totally forgot to do the slides. Quick run. Bob party in the back garden. There's a big food fight going on there. This is the workshop. You can see this is a shrine to Bob. This is Zeb McGann. He's a fantastic artist. He did a lot of the original designs, and this is one of the flyers for our nights, Bob nights. This was actually around a can of baked beans, so we gave out. People had beans as well. Another flyer with my favourites. This is what, as you can see, this is not a very good example, but we didn't have phone cameras with phones with cameras on. So this is like the Bob sticker around town. This was a bit more obvious, actually. Beware false prophets. See if they'd be the right thing to do. And this was an Ogden. This is an Ogden at 6 in the morning. I can't tell you how fantastic these parties were. There's thousands of people down in Ogden, and actually I haven't come to that bit yet. Aha! Not today. So, we did parties at Ogden. And this was like pre-internet days, or hardly anyone had mobile phones, so it was all done by word of mouth. And I think they gave that real. People felt they would belong to something truly underground. You know, there was no flyers or anything. People just turned up there, and they were truly brilliant times. And never any trouble. We were actually then featured on Newsnight on a piece called Deconstructionism within youth culture. So people were taking it seriously as well. I had a letter from, they loved it, and a couple of weeks after they visited, they said they had a memo from the BBC and Slack was mentioned twice. So we were getting in the high places. We set up our own shop, Bob Hoax. This is Bob Hope. This was in Trafalgar Street. We set it up with 50 quid and just we had about 4 6 sheets and 3 t-shirts. It did last for about 3 or 4 years. We sold underground literature. It was sort of a beacon for like-minded souls. These were absolutely brilliant times for Brighton. It's always been a fantastic city, but early 90s Brighton for me, well, all the way through, it was brilliant. It felt like no other place in Britain. It truly had it. It had its own magazine, The Free State of Brighton. More artistic and creative and alternative people coming here, more so than ever before. And Brighton and Bob just went hand in hand. Brighton's inherent intolerance and bohemian attitude, it was just the perfect place for slap. We tried taking it to Ipswich. Yeah, you guess what happened to Ipswich. I'm lucky we didn't get a run out of town. They're like, what the fuck is this? So it surely was a Brighton phenomenon. I think something when Genesis Peorage from Temple of Psychic Youth, because he was based here, and then when he wasn't allowed back in the country, I think they gave a vacuum for like a weird cult, and we just stepped in there. And it's all about timing sometimes. And our timing was really so we were involved in quite a lot of the Brighton activity. This was the squat at the old Justice Court for the Anti-Criminal Justice Bill. As you can see, we've got Bob's Knot bills there, and also the first Fringe Festival actually was organised above the shop. The girls started getting the feeling that Bob was a bit too male orientated, so they started doing their own thing, Connie Dogs, and they came up. And they came up with their own slogans. My particular favourite was "Don't fuck them if they can't take a joke." So really, you should rerun that stuff. These are mad times indeed, and we seem to be in the eye of the storm. I remember one time I was in the shop and a friend came running in and he said, "Have you heard about this new comic that's coming? It's called Hail Bob." And I was like, "What? There's a comic called Hail Bob. It's coming very close. It's never been discovered. It's coming really close to that. What does it mean?" Well, it means there was a comic called Hally Bob. And then in the weird sort of life imitating art, there was the Heaven's Gate cult in America who actually committed suicide because they thought aliens were behind it in the comic slipstream. Also, obviously, you had Waco and the Branch Davidians. So weird cults from Texas were having a bit of a bad time of it, and things were getting quite freaky. But the worst thing that could happen to us is if we were getting too popular. The best thing about an in-joke is if it's shared by the minority. So we decided to launch our own backlash and start our own anti-slap campaign. We shut the shop and decided to get onto it with more individual events. My partner in crime was Rev Kev. He did the dance parade on Brighton Seafront, 30,000 people, 20 floats. Great day, never been repeated. For me, I put curated the Life, Liberty, Survival exhibition at the Phoenix Gallery. They weren't too sure about having us there, and they put us in August, which is the actual dead month. If you're doing an art in August, there's no students around, everyone's on the seafront. We had the biggest ever attendance there, 2,000 people. We had 80 pages in the comments book. There's usually just a couple of paragraphs. We had 80 pages of scribble. Not everyone liked us. There was like, I'd rather suck the stale urine out of Jim's trousers than spend another minute here. You can't please everyone. I was actually curating it one day, and this guy walked in, big guy with his 2 kids and his wife, and he pointed at the pictures of the parties and he said, look. See, I told you. He then turned around, took his trousers and pants down, and he had the worst ever Bob tattoo on his arse. But it must have been something to him. He'd been so inspired by it that he had a terrible tattoo. And then in 1997, we decided to run Bob for Parliament. This is one of those, let's put up Bob for Parliament, that'd be a great idea. We didn't want to have any campaign, it was purely designed for on the night, returning officer say, Bob Dobbs, X amount of votes. That'd be hilarious. For us, I don't care what anyone else thinks, that'd be really funny. So we managed to get get it together. We had to find 10 people who lived in the ward, get £500 together. We registered at 5 to 4 on the last possible. We had to register by 4 o'clock on the particular day. 5 to 4, we managed to get in there. Pennies, making up the £500. Bob Dobbs, you're ready to stand for the 1997 election. The Green Party the next day phoned me up and said, "You can't do this. We want to take you to court for fraudulently running for Parliament under a fictitious name." And I was like, "Oh, be you." You know, I started reading some of the names of the monster raving loony party. Do you think these people are really called this? And I was quite chuffed that they actually thought we were going to be a threat to them. So we set up. It was actually an amazing night. I was incredibly drunk. Basically, you get round the back and there are all the counters there. It's very cold, and they did not like me at all. Drunk and I talked to Derek Spencer's wife. She was very flirtatious. He was the incumbent Tory MP at the time. Actually, he didn't actually come out the front because he got beat that night, and he was a very brave man. He didn't come out the front to face the crowd. But I did, and we had a sort of hardcore of about 30 people in the audience. Obviously, this is 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, so a lot of people from clubs were coming in. By the time we got on stage, there's 2,000 people, and all you can hear is bob, 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 bob. They kept trying to do the count, and they were bob, 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 bob. I got 78 votes. He was supposed to come over live, but it was too anarchic for him, and they never did. At the end, I didn't know what to do. The stage dived off. All the nights, it was my favourite ever night. None of us knew what to expect. So that was the 97 election. I felt at the time that because it was after 18 years of Tory rule, we'd really hijacked the sort of feel-good vibe, and it was like, well, we'll never do that again because it just can't compete with that. So that was the election in '97. July the 5th, 1998. Now that's very important. That was a very important date in the Bob Log because that was the day that the aliens were supposed to come down. 8 o'clock in the morning, and any card-carrying member of the subgenius would be taken away. So obviously we had to have a party at Ovendene to celebrate this. We were celebrating the end of the world. On the way down to Ovendene there was a big billboard for the film at the time, which was Armageddon, which seemed to we had to have a massive great bob on that. And we burned effigies on the beach.
Slides!
Slides.
It's been a while.
We weren't actually very subtle with the election. If you don't give a fuck, vote.
So we did a tour manager.
Oh, no, this is the next. So so we burnt effigies on the beach. 5 minutes.
Oh no!
Good night. They said, "What are you doing?" And we said, "Oh, we're celebrating the end of the world." And he said, "Well, as long as you're not slaughtering any sheep, you can go ahead." So we carried on. So we had obviously the aliens didn't turn up, so we had another party the following year. This was the one that Ravers leave a trail of chaos. That's a Parker Knoll sofa. That's my Parker Knoll sofa. This isn't the Hurricane bloody Katrina. We were touching by that, but it was my favourite of all parts. Thousands of people. Brilliant night. And so that was going to be that. Bob was going to, I was going to get on with the normal life, and we were going to get on. And it's a funny way of dragging you back in. And then in 2001, I was out on my friend's birthday. It was early January the 5th. We're in the Pavilion Tavern. Nobody in there. I went to the loo, and there was this guy called Jeff. Big Scouser guy. Now, I'd met Jeff once before, and that was in 1997 at the Dome, where he'd come up and introduce himself as Ronnie Biggs. I said, "Oh, Jeff," and he went, "You're Bob Dobbs." Started crying his eyes out, threw his arms around me, and said, "That was the most amazing night of my life. You must run again." So it was like, okay. So the 2001 election wasn't done by public demand, it was done by the drunk Scouser. And So this time we really wanted to make a campaign of it. So what we did, a friend Toby phoned Norman Cook, who was the biggest DJ in the world at the time, and said, will you do a benefit? Good old Norm, he said yes. We booked a night at the Concord. We raised enough money to have 3 candidates. Friend Caroline and Hunter built the Wheel of Misfortune. Basically, the idea was what we did, we had people put their own manifesto ideas when they came to the club. We had this on the stage. Every now and again, we'd stop the music, spin it, pick one out, and that would be our manifesto. We demand the right to arm bears, cannibalise legalists, exile Simon Fanshawe. He'd done the own Brighton the Place to Be campaign. We did our own Brighton the Place to Beg campaign. So, right, so I'm going to... Yeah, oh yes, the shove-off campaign. Us from Brightonians didn't have anything more to do with Hove, so we did the shove-off campaign. Oh no, this is our manifesto. And this is what we did to the sign. The Hove candidate agreed with the campaign, but for entirely different reasons. On the night we had a cold cup for the ocean rooms. Again, once again, it was brilliant. The count was utter chaos. You can hear anything apart from Bob. I actually got 550 votes and beat UKIP. So Bob suddenly was all the rage again. We booked a night at the Concord to celebrate 10 years. We wanted something a bit different, something a bit more cabaret orientated, so we called it the Real Slackers and Punters Club. Now, the 70s programme, the Real Tappers and Shunters Club. That's what we were going. That was like a place in the Northern Club that had Bernard Manning. So it was something like that without the racism. Part of that, the main act from that, we had David Van Day in his bow van, a super glider, and we came up with the idea of Piss. Now Piss was an air band. Yeah, we took the punk ethos of the band that can't play to the band that don't play. So, there's the election, that was part of the election. That's me on the stage. They didn't like me. This is Piss. This is the only picture in fact, this is actually my kids wearing the Piss mask. I couldn't actually find it. So we had Piss. The whole Piss story, I could sit here and do a whole half an hour on Piss. Piss actually, they had an amazing career. They got beaten by a singing sheep after this, but basically they wore bob masks. Simon had a 3-foot rubber phallus that squirted, and basically they were air band. They didn't do anything. They just pretended to do Kiss songs. They played V2 Festival. They played Glastonbury. Actually, if you see the film, Julian Temple's film of Glastonbury, a brilliant film, Piss's performance is actually featured in that, which is ridiculous. You think of all the bands that played Glastonbury. Piss then actually got a record deal. This is an air band. This is a piece of Piss. The first double B-side ever. Doesn't really stand up to repeated plays. One part of it we had the crowd chanting beforehand, and all we are saying is give Piss a chant. They ended up breaking up with musical differences. They come back to one final gig where, of all people, Motley Crue on their final, their after tour party. Wanted Piss to play and 30 strippers. So Piss reformed, did the night. There was not a hint of irony in the house. So they went down.